So this is the Thermaltake View 170TG, and I haven't seen any other reviews on it, so I thought I might make a quick review for you if you're looking at buying this case. So let's get right into it. So the box is packed in some pretty light packaging. It's just got some styrofoam on the edges, but it does have a nice protective cardboard corner, which is really good and really sturdy, so that'll keep you from breaking any sort of corners. Now, I opted in to get the white model of the case, but it does also come in black as well. Taking a quick glance at the case, it's got a fish tank design, so you've got two tempered glass side panels, one on the front and one on the side, as you'd normally have. And then we've got three fans, so one fan as the rear exhaust, and then two as the intake. Now the thing to note about these two fans is that they are not reverse blade fans, so you will be able to see the back of the fan. Now all the side panels on the case are toolless, so all you do is grab this little tab here and then just pull out, and it should just come out of the pins. So taking the side panel off is really simple. And then the same goes for the front panel as well. Now some really good design here from Thermaltake are these two little tabs that insert in two little sockets there on the bottom so they don't fall out. Taking a closer look inside the case, you've got two fans over here which are not reverse blade fans, so you can see the back of the fan hub, which is a bit unfortunate, and then one exhaust fan on the rear. Now these are RGB, so you've got your RGB header there, which does in fact have a daisy chain. Then you've also got the 3-pin header that you use to plug into your motherboard. Then taking a look around the back, again another toolless panel. We take that off and we can see all our cabling around the back. Now in addition to the daisy chainable RGB connectors that you can see here, we do have an adapter for the 3-pin on the fans, but unfortunately it is black, so you will need to hide this behind the case if you are looking at hiding all the cables and making it an all-white system. Then in terms of the front I/O, we do have our front panel connector, which is really nice to see because it's one whole solid unit, so plugging that in is going to be really easy. Our USB 3 cable, as well as our audio port. Taking a look at the accessories, you can see that we've just got this plastic bag of mostly silver screws and some cable ties. So yes, this is definitely a compromise that you're making here on the PC case. They're not going to blend in with the white system too much. So if you are looking for a completely white system, you will want to buy some white screws off of Amazon or something. Then taking a look at the power supply basement, you can see that we've got our 3.5-inch hard drive bay, only for one drive. Then we've got an SSD slot here, an SSD mount here, and I believe you can also mount an SSD in here. You're also able to move the hard drive cage if you like. You can move it to the right, but I don't really see the point in doing that. Around the back we've got our PCIe slots, and unfortunately these are breakaway tabs, so you cannot put them in once you've taken them out. Now the case dimensions, they measure 438mm by 212 by 377.5mm. So it's definitely not a small case, but it's not too big of a PC case. And it also weighs 6.35 kilos with all the side panels back on. For the additional features of the case, you've got a hole here where you can route your PCI connector. We've also got one of those standoffs which has the little mounting support on it where you can easily mount your motherboard. So if you just rest that on there, it should rest there just fine. And that helps with installing if your case is upright as you do so. Unfortunately, color matching white PC parts can be quite hard. So I will say that this mesh net on the top of the case, it doesn't really match the color of the outer case. This is more of a creamy white sort of thing, whereas this is a pure snow white. So yeah, it doesn't really match in color, but you can probably make it past that in a dark room, or if you just don't really look at the top of your PC that much, or you can take away the filter altogether. And it does use magnets to attach, so that's nice. In terms of front I/O, we've got two USB 3 ports, a headphone microphone jack, a reset switch, and of course a power button. Also on this case is some mesh netting on the power supply basement. So instead of having a solid panel here, there is actually just a mesh net that runs all the way across and all the way around the front. So there is some additional room for airflow. However, if you are using a black power supply, you will be able to see those black cables under here. So you will want to manage them maybe through the power supply and the hard drive cage. You'll want to do that so they hide away. So as nice as it is to get some extra airflow into the power supply, you probably don't need it, especially because this is a budget PC case for budget builds. So having this solid would definitely help you reduce the cost of the budget because you wouldn't need a white power supply. Or you can just ignore the aesthetic down the power supply basement, as when you're standing back, you can tell less and less. It's pretty obvious on camera, but you can sort of get past it. Especially if you're looking at it on an angle, it makes it a lot more discreet. But front on, you can definitely see the difference. In terms of fan support, you've got room for two 120s here, one 120 on the back, as well as two 140s on the top if you want to expand this. However, you probably wouldn't want to, just because that would set up a negative pressure system unless you were using a radiator. In CPU cooler compatibility, you do have room for a tower cooler of up to 160mm in height, which means that things like the Peerless Assassin 120 SE from Thermaltake, that'll be 157mm, so that will easily fit in this case. Then for our graphics card, Thermaltake claim that you can fit a 340mm graphics card in here, so you can definitely put a nice chunky like 4070 Super, or even a 4080 if you really want it in the system, but you have to keep in mind the slot thickness. So you've got 3 slots up here with 1 slot gap. Yeah, it's kind of pushing it a little bit, but I'd say 3 slots is probably quite safe. 4 is too much because you're going to be sucking air out of the power supply basement and it's just not going to work very well. Then you also do have some support for some extra fans over here. You'll see that there are some mounting holes for two 120s, so you can put one there and one there that just fire directly up. So if you really wanted, you could mount one here. But the problem with mounting one here is that you do actually interfere with the cable running out for the GPU. So if you were planning on using this, you can't really mount a fan here because it's going to block your access to that. So keep that in mind, that you can probably run maybe a fan here, but probably not here because you are going to be running your GPU cables through that. As for the performance gain, you probably won't gain much from actually just mounting a fan here. You're better off just not using one at all. In terms of motherboard support, you can support a mini RTX motherboard or a micro ATX motherboard measuring 9.6 inches by 9.6 inches. However, I'll get into that a little bit later with a few problems with that. Now, as I was talking about before, one of the big problems with this case is actually the motherboard support. So if I just put this 9.6 inch by 9.6 inch motherboard in, which is technically supported by the manual. So I'm just going to put this motherboard in and then I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. Now the motherboard's not screwed in all the way right now, but I hope you can see that, in that these holes that were made initially for the cutout for the 24-pin cable, they're now completely covered. So you cannot put a 24-pin cable through there to route to here. You can't put a SATA cable, you can't put a fan cable. The only way you can do it is by routing like a really flat cable behind, and even then you're pushing it a little bit. So even in their marketing material, they do route a cable from the top over, and it looks just kind of a little bit ugly. Whereas if you have a thinner motherboard, not a square motherboard with 9.6 inch dimensions, you can fit it in, and I've done it before in my friend's PC build. You do have those cutouts, but definitely not if you're using a square motherboard like this. So now I'm going to try and see if I can route my flat power supply cables through and see if that fits. Now I've just got the fan going in my room because it's currently really warm, even though it's an evening. And you can see that I've kind of got it in the case. You can see that it does want to push out, but if I were to screw that up here and up here, it definitely would stay in. But it's still something that you really have to be wary of when you're buying this PC. Especially if you don't have flat cables like I am, you just have no chance of getting a fat cable through there. So what you'd really have to do is take out the fans and just not have any fans, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of the case, you know? Because you're meant to be able to see the fans, you're meant to be able to see the RGB. Yeah, it's a bit pointless without it. So I'm going to screw in the rest of these and test how good the motherboard is holding up. So yeah, you can do it and you can get away with it, but it's really not ideal, and those cutouts really should be further to the right and the case should be a little bit larger so that you can get the full length of these fans in and also those cutouts. But you know, it's acceptable, and especially with most micro ATX motherboards, they kind of cut off here, so you do have that extra room. It's only more premium micro ATX motherboards that tend to be wider. So I'm going to set up the rest of the system, then I'm going to run a quick little thermal test and show you how it looks. And in terms of cable management, you know, it's alright. You've got one sort of channel where you're meant to put most cables, like your 24-pin and your front I/O cables, and that channel works really well. I do have an ARGB hub set in right here, which is kind of complicating things a little bit, but I'd give this probably a 7 out of 10 for cable management. There's definitely a lot of depth right here, so it doesn't have any issues of bulging against the case side panel, which is really important, especially considering that this cage side panel isn't secured by a screw. So for the cable management, I'd give it a solid 7 out of 10, and this is really quite decent for a budget case. You've also got a bunch of tie down points down here, across here and down this side. So yeah, 7 out of 10. And this is the final product of the PC case. You've got 2 tempered glass side panels, a nice fish tank design, and this is all for 69 Australian dollars or 40 US dollars. That's just pretty awesome design in my opinion, and you're not going to get much better value than that. And the other cases on the market, they really don't offer any sort of the features like this one, and they also just look crap in general. So after running both a CPU and GPU stress test isolated as well as a combined test of Cinebench and Thermaltake, these are the results on screen. Now the 5700 XT does run a little bit warmer of graphics cards, but this is still a very much acceptable result. So all in all, for 69 Australian dollars, this case is awesome value and I honestly wouldn't recommend anything else. The white variant looks really cool, but of course you can get the black variant and spend less money on white parts if you want just an all black PC, and it still looks pretty awesome as a whole. If this video did help you in any way, shape or form, please make sure you like, comment and share the video to others, and yeah, consider buying this PC case from the link in the description. Quick message to Thermaltake, this case is really awesome and I love it. The only complaint that I have, which was really quite major, was actually just that cutout on the motherboard not being wide enough. So if the case was just a little bit longer, you could definitely accommodate for this and the case would have literally no issues in my opinion. So Thermaltake, you can do a little bit better, but overall I'm very satisfied with this case.